Nothing about this is structural. This is not acceptable. Well, you knew that was coming, eh? This is actually kind of amazing. This was built wrong, it was holding moisture, it wasn't being able to dry, and it still isn't rotted out the top of this wood. If this looks level to you, I'm going to suggest you go seek some medical attention. This is extremely brutal. The guy who built this deck didn't even take the time to lift off the welcome mat. Unbelievable. There's a lot of structural issues here. We're going to have to make a list, figure out a plan to restore all of that before we can redeck. I think we're going to increase value in this kitchen. This is not acceptable. And that is money in the bank. This is where it gets fun. Fire in the hole! It's not the time to be putting out the big dollars. Thank you, Hero. There's another tool you won't need to buy. Perfect every time. So not all decks are created equal. In today's Reality Renovision episode, we're going to reface this deck that was built about 20-something years ago by someone who obviously didn't know anything about what they were doing. They tried their best and failed miserably. So let's go take a quick look at all of the construction problems that we have here and what we're going to do to salvage this deck and bring it back to life. So we've all heard the expression, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. And that holds true for deck construction. For a long time, the basics have remained the same. Some of the technologies have changed, some of the finishings have changed, some of the products have changed, but the basis for how to build a deck has always remained the same. You build a box, you put in your floor joists, very similar to at-home construction, 16-inch on center. You make it strong enough to carry weight, you find a way to transfer that load to the ground or attach it to the house, and then you finish it. Well, here's where everybody fails. They build a box, they get their joist package proper, but they don't know how to finish. Now, 20-something years ago, if you weren't the son of a carpenter, your resources available to help you build your deck were absolutely atrocious. The occasional book, the odd TV show that showed you a tip here or there, but nowadays we've got access to information, and that's why we're here. We're going to show you all the things that were done wrong and how you can take your dismal failure of a deck that you've inherited from someone in your family and reface it and make it look absolutely beautiful and functional and safe. Because first of all, when you put a railing system and attach it to the surface of your deck and it has not really built into the structure, it's not safe. The idea is this. In the engineering world, they try to use this concept of a 400-pound man drunk falling sideways into a railing. Is it going to keep him from falling off the building? Not in this situation. Somebody's going to get killed. This is not acceptable. So when you surface screw, this is what you get. You get a little bit of screw into a 5/4 board. Nothing about this is structural. It's just wrong. And the fact that these plates are all tight against the floor means there's no air moving here, so there's no way to dry the boards out. If this was guaranteed to rot out because moisture gets trapped underneath here. So keep in mind when you're finishing your deck, always have your support columns right into the frame. Try to avoid using those surface mounted situations and give it some rigidity. This will help extend the length of your deck. Now design wise, I get what they were doing and it's not a terrible idea. You know, you've got your spindles, you got good spacing so your kid can't crawl out and fall to their death. They've got this little 2x4 with a 5/4 inch board, what I like to call a drink ledge. So in theory, it's good. You know, you can rest here, you can put your drinks down. It's a little low, but this was the standard back in the day. It's a 36 inch. Nowadays we go with a 42. That way you can lean on it without having to bend over. That's great. But the problem here with this particular situation, again, is it's all surface and at the end of the day, if you're screwing down your top plate from the top, again, you're encouraging all the kinds of rot, okay? When you're attaching a top plate, always do it from the bottom. Use the right length screw so it doesn't come out through the top, and you'll get a much nicer look, and that's something that you can actually give a light sand finish to, and it'll be perfect. Okay. So everything about this deck is screaming one thing. It says, hey, I went and picked up the lumber myself, and I used my little hatchback convertible car, and I had everything cut down or bought everything in 8-foot pieces. So you can see where this deck isn't even 16 feet long. And we've always had lumber long enough to do this in one piece, but they've gone ahead and stitched and seamed in. And this is classic situation here, okay? This is two boards meeting. I got all the screws exposed. I got organic material in here that's just sitting there rotting away, and these boards are just slowly receding. This is erosion, and it's rot, and it means that you have a ticking time bomb. If you're going to build something and spend all that time and energy and money to build it, you should build it so that it lasts. I'm telling you right now, if this was built a little bit differently with full pieces of lumber, we wouldn't be sitting here today resurfacing. But because there was a little bit of missing knowledge, and they cut a corner and they didn't pay 50 bucks to get the material delivered, now you're in a situation where you have to do it all over again. But not all of it, just the top. Now I'm really hoping that when we pull this back, we're going to find a substructure that's usable or at least repairable so that we can resurface this deck and not have to start from scratch. And that's the hope. So this deck is awesome because it's a classic example of someone who's doing it for the first time. They didn't have the experience to realize. They started laying their deck boards right here flush with their joists, with the rim joists, okay? Went back towards the house, made their cuts at the house, which is fine. Now in theory, you want your deck, it should be like a step. You want to have that nosing. And then they added skirt board. And then they realized that the skirt board was protruding past the deck. That looked ridiculous. Let me get this pile of junk out of the way. And so the answer to that problem was go and buy some interior molding. This is pine. This isn't even supposed to be used outside. And they capped this just to make it look pretty, threw a few nails in it and called it done. Oh. Now I don't want to be too hard on the homeowner because obviously they cared enough to try to make it look pretty. But the reality is, if you don't know the end from the beginning when you're building something, you're going to run into these kinds of problems. So stick with this and we'll explain how to tear this apart and how to rebuild it. We're going to make this beautiful and we're going to give it another whole 20, 30 year lifespan. It's only going to take one day. So if you're like most people, you're living in a house that's got a pre-existing deck that was built with great intentions, but not with the greatest of skill level. So we're dealing with a deck today that's as dead as the plant that was sitting on it. Not nice to look at. The sad thing is the substructure of this deck, I can tell just by looking at it, it's still nice and solid, but everything on top is completely rotten. It hasn't been managed properly, it hasn't been dealt with for the weather, and it wasn't built right so that it could dry. And it's just been rotting where it sits for the last 15 years. Such a shame. So we're gonna get this all taken care of and removed so that we can rebuild it and have a beautiful place to hang out again. So we found out really quickly here when we pushed the railing over that they were using the wrong size screws to build everything. So let's find out if they put the floor down with the right screws. Nope, this wood is 1.25 inches, which means this screw should be at least a 2.5 inch, all right? You want it to be 1.5 times longer than the material you're attaching, and that's just not cutting it. So these are short. Now that's just spinning, and that's just spinning. Oh, occasionally you're gonna grab. Yeah, we'll try to pull as many as we can. I think we're gonna be using the crowbar to lift it out. That means that the top of all these joists are gonna be compromised. So when we put our new decking lumber down, we're actually gonna have to go back with a 3-inch screw so that we're going past the compromised lumber into solid meat again. This wood under here, aside from a little bit of organic material that builds up, which is somewhat normal, it's actually in pretty good shape. This is actually kind of amazing. To be honest with you, when I lifted this up, I was expecting to see a lot more rot on the surface of this deck. This is a testimony to how good quality a pressure-treated substructure is. This was built wrong, it was holding moisture, it wasn't being able to dry, and it still isn't rotted out the top of this wood. Like that can still hold a screw. That's amazing. I knew that was coming in. The greatest enemy you have when you're building a deck close to the ground is what I call the sauna effect. It's because of the sun heating down and it draws all the moisture out of the dirt and it pulls it into the wood because it really overheats underneath that. So if you don't have a lot of airflow underneath your porch or your deck and you're close to the ground, you're gonna rot prematurely. If this looks level to you, I'm going to suggest you go seek some medical attention. This is extremely brutal. This is a mission that's successful. We pulled off most of the deck boards here. The way we're doing it, we're leaving our wood intact and it's in good condition. However, it's obvious that this was a do-it-yourselfer project. There is a lot of structural issues here. We're going to have to make a list, figure out a plan to restore all of that before we can redeck. Here we go, Max. The guy who built this deck didn't even take the time to lift off the welcome mat. Unbelievable. So what we have here is an obvious example of what not to do. We've got part of this structure attached to the house, part of the structure using the concrete step as structure. We have 4x4 posts that look like they're just in the dirt. We're gonna dig out some dirt and see maybe they're in concrete, so that'll help. We have rim joists, joist hangers, wrong kind of fasteners, not hangers on the other side, not attached to the post properly. Everything's out of level. I don't know if this was original or if it's just a sunken post. We have so many little issues here that we have to tackle. And of course the goal here was to just reface it and rebuild, but I think we might be in for a little bit more work than that. Whew. Time to pull out the pen and paper. We got some notes to make. So we're going to talk real quick about structural framing for decks outside. And there are two kinds of decks that you can build. One is where it actually has structure and footings and is attached to the house, which by you're actually attaching to the building and all of your posts that are going to the ground are down into a footing that goes below a frost line if you have one in your area, or it's in something solid that's not going to be in direct contact with dirt so it doesn't cause rotting and premature dropping of your deck. In this situation, this DIY homeowner that built this deck did a combination of both. And you'll see this all the time. People think it's a really good idea to attach to the house and then they just drop some 4x4 posts into the soil. They'll pack it down a little bit maybe. It's all a disaster. So we've got all kinds of movement going on. The middle is almost completely sunken right out of sight. And I'll just drop this in here for you to have a quick peek. There is a 1-inch gap over 4.5 feet here, and this is already the low part of the deck. When I go and put my level this way, I am looking at, well, I can stick my whole hand underneath here. This is a 6 foot level. It's an 8-foot deck, and you get an idea of how dramatic the drop is in the middle here. Now the screws are coming loose, everything's starting to rot, absolute mess. Of course, nothing is ever square, but what we can do in this situation is we can come up with a strategy for restoring this frame so that we can actually put a deck surface back on top. So every step that's taken is pushing this into the dirt. So what we want to do right away is eliminate it. Already a really big improvement. Just getting rid of that one stupid shim. All the weight of that deck, this whole assembly is on one roofing nail. Just total incompetence. You know, there's a time and a place to save money when you're building something, but when you're relying on these fasteners to do all of the structural carrying, you really can't afford to go and, whoops, not buy the right nails. Yep, that shouldn't be able to be done like that. Now what do we got over here? Hey, finishing nails. Love it. Nails on one end, screws on the other. Some of them are galvanized, some of them aren't. Somebody's building this out of a jar of fasteners. Whatever they picked up they used is unbelievable. So there are a lot of connections made here. So these boards are actually in the way, they're not necessary. Yep. When it comes apart that easy. It fell off the other side. If you got a nail that's all soft and weak, you can't hammer it through, put it in sideways. Now roll it over this way. There, you can pull it out the other side. My whole hand underneath there. But when we put our new piece of wood that spans the entire gap, and I lift this into the floor joist, bam, my whole deck will be flush. There we go. So when you're building a deck, you don't always have the luxury of the right tool for the right job. And as a homeowner, if you have a skill saw, you've got all you need in order to do your framing, plus one of these. So what I do is I hold this against my wood, I hold the saw plate against the triangle, and I can actually run over until my blade is exactly where I want it, back it up, start it, and I run the saw against my triangle that I have pinched in place with my hand. That is a technique for cutting all your dimensional lumber that you don't have to use the chop saw. So you can actually have the saw with you, with your triangle, and you can be running around your deck making all your cuts and cutting them on the site. Boom, 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 flip them over and screw them in. It'll save you a lot of running back and forth to a stationary saw like this. Slide this along. So 2x6 requires one screw for every 2 inches. Classic example of a homeowner who built a deck who didn't know what he was doing, but he was close. You know, there's a lot of what's done here that was kind of close to right, and with a few modifications it can all be saved. Now that is almost perfect, except this corner's a little low and our whole front's a little low. So now we've got our structure flat, we'll call it, and we have 5 points where all the wood is sitting in dirt, and that's what we're going to fix next. When a guy doesn't even take his welcome mat off the step, when he's building the deck, he's not pouring concrete. There ain't no way. Now the idea here is to lift the deck and level it off. Here's our temporary support. Makes our gap, yeah, 3 inch. That's pretty intense. Important to note that in our region, check your local building code, but any structure like this that we build in our region under 24 inches has no building code. So there's no rules. So you can do your whole popsicle stick deck if you want to, but just so that I can sleep at night, I like to use some intelligence, some structural fasteners, a little bit of science. But you know, legally, what this other homeowner had done, there's nothing wrong with it. So it was lousy, but it wasn't wrong because it's not illegal. Strange. I'm throwing in some limestone screenings here just so that I can level this off. That's structurally sound. Throw this on our new piece of wood that goes right from one side to the other. That looks good. Yeah. Well, this time I'm going to lift it to my line and then about 1/8 of an inch above. Whew. That way, once I'm done putting all my aggregate down here, I'll be able to tamp it into place. Whew. Back up our screw and watch this. Down to my line. Perfect. So with this, I'm just basically doing a splint, knowing that I put enough screws in this block, and that is basically 6. I have 500 pounds of shear strength in this one corner. So I would have to fit 6 adults between that wall and this corner, and between here and here, jumping up and down with all their strength simultaneously before we are having a risk of heading on structural failure. I'm pretty sure that we're not going to end up with that kind of a scenario. All right, this is just really great for leveling things, eh? By the order of the beaky behind us. So my favorite technique for installing a joist hanger, when you're doing a joist hanger, every one of these little holes gets a screw. This is engineered to hold the bracket to your rim or your joist. This is engineered to hold this piece of material from separating from the bracket so it doesn't fall out of the seat. And this is not a coated screw. It's ACQ compliant, but it's not a coated screw. This is an alloy. It's forged. It'll never rust, period. Not like galvanized nails, not like ACQ screws. That will never rust. And if you aren't using a forged alloy on your Simpson Strong Tie, you'll fail inspection. And sooner or later, one of these days, it'll just fall apart. The copper in the pressure treated lumber is what causes the oxidation that kills your screw. So the coating only protects it for so long. That's why when you're dealing with structure, we deal with point load, we deal with brackets, we deal with forged screws. Those elements will never rust and will never fail. I mean, all the boards can lift off and rot off, and that's fine. You're not gonna fall through your deck. There you go. So we have basically reconstructed our deck. We've got all our point loads taken care of. We have our new joist package in. We have joist hangers everywhere. We've put some new headlock screws right through the plate into the wall just to strengthen things up because it looked a little soft. Over here on the side, we've got a 2x4 that's carrying our load. This is really not right. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer all of our load points on this front of the deck right from the framing to the porch by using the Cedar shimming technique. So the reality is our joist package that's carrying weight here is only 3.5 feet long. So it's not a big concern that we're using a little smaller lumber there. That's what's there. And rebuilding that means tearing everything apart. And nobody's in the mood for that. This deck's already been here for 20 years and nobody's had an accident. It's just kind of funny because here we've got this lovely 2x6 area that looks like they use scraps to do the job. They've got two of them cut down here and a little scrap in the middle. That's just not gonna cut it, folks. When you're scabbing something like this in a wall, using a 1 foot piece is probably fine. But when you're doing it on the floor, you really want to laminate the majority of the board, if not the whole thing. And then here's the key. Every 6 inches, you want to go from high to low to high, like big W's all the way across the board. That's going to give you that strength of a triangle. Wood can't bend if it's attached in that manner. All right. That's not going anywhere anymore. So now it's not just flat. Oh, I'm loving it. You know, when you get down here close and personal like this, you almost see every last joist at the very last second come together and touch. That is absolutely sexy. I don't think we could have done that good a job with brand new lumber. The other thing we're going to use here is headlock screws. I love this technology. These things are awesome because they replace the strength of a 3/8 galvanized lag bolt, and they allow me to put structural strength in every piece of lumber that I'm tying together, not relying on nails or screws, so that I've got enough shear strength where I'm being creative with my repairs, that I can carry all the weight of a whole family being out here without any risk to their safety. This is a little overkill, right? Reality is 3 of these screws will hold the whole deck up. These replace the strength of a 3/8 galvanized bolt, which means I don't have to drill, knock in a bolt, throw in a washer and a nut, and then wrench it all together. I can just drive this in with my impact driver, and I'm structurally sound forever. The last step you really want to take care of, and this is really simple, is you're going to have your outside ridge plate. And you want to create a nice level surface off the front, top and bottom. So there's 2 advantages to having this piece of wood down here. One, you have a skirt board that you can attach that'll be flush. 2, when we put in our posts for our railing system, we don't have to go surface mount. We don't have to just rely on the first 4 or 5 inches of wood here to screw to. We can actually cut our posts to go all the way down into here, so I can attach it down here, in the middle, and with the top rail. That creates 3 points of contact, which makes the entire deck so strong, no one will ever be able to fall through the railing like I did when we started the job. When you're building your frame, just before you start decking, make sure you get your structural posts in place. And by structural, I mean like railing structure. The idea here is we want to know exactly what we're going to do for how we're cutting our lumber. 8-foot posts, this one's a little bit more than 8 feet long. What I do is I just kind of grab a few of my materials from my order. I like to visualize the space. This is basically the height of that railing plus an inch, because you want to keep a gap down there so that things stay nice and dry. Then there's another 2x4 and then a 5/4 board. That leaves us with almost 3 inches of stub, which is perfect for the LED cap. Usually those lights only sit about an inch over the top. And that'll just give everything a nice, clean, intentional look. And then the shorter post will just be brought over here somewhere in the middle. When we get into that kind of math, that's part of the railing design, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what we want to do is just make a mental note. This is going to be the height. Our middle post is going to be coming out of this deck right to this point. What I'm doing here is I'm not relying on the screws through the rim plate to hold the posts. You'll find these things love to twist over time. Don't forget, when cedar grows like this. Okay? So when you cut it, it wants to untangle itself. That's why they always twist. So when you're putting in a post, even if it's overnight, you've got to have a top rail attached temporarily, screw it all in, and make sure that it's not going to all go twist on you. Because you'll come out in the morning and it'll be like, you got candy cane deck. And what this does, this gives me a lot of more support, because now when there's pressure or force on the railing up here going outwards, it's levered here. And then the bottom inside the deck wants to go that way. So by putting this block here and I restrict the ability of the bottom of that post to swing into the deck, it makes the top of the deck all that much stronger. So now when I'm pulling on this, I'm not just pulling on the top of this, I'm also creating a force on the bottom of this post going inwards. But with that blocking there, I don't have to rely on the thread on these screws to hold it in place. I also have the shear strength of the screws going into the 2x6 here at 3 different points, help hold it all together. If you don't set your rails and your blocking before you put your decking on, the only option you have left is to notch them and hang them off the side. They split easy. You could use those fancy little post cap things and screw it together and screw it down. And that's all fine and good in some scenarios. But this is actually going to be a railing, and there's actually going to be people coming and going. And safety is a concern here because there's going to be 2 stairs. So we want to make sure that all of this is as rigid as humanly possible. And that is all part of structure. So we're just going to get this finished up, and then it'll be time to start laying the deck boards. Project update. We didn't get as much done today as I'd hoped. But sometimes when you're organized for your delivery for the same day that you start a project, the delivery comes a lot later than you hope for. That's such as life. The good news is I was hanging out with my buddy Max, so it didn't hurt at all. We have our structure completed. We're level, we have our posts figured out, we know our design elements now. All we have left to do now really is put all of our decking down and finish off with all of our design trims and add some stairs. So that'll be tomorrow. No problem to finish all that off in one day. And you know, maybe we can finish early tomorrow. That'd be nice. It is morning of day 2. Yeah, you heard me say it, day 2. Here's what happened. We ordered our material for delivery yesterday morning, and for whatever reason, the gods at the delivery gave us late in the afternoon. So we could only get so much done yesterday. Besides, we did a lot of work on the deck, structure. Yeah, maybe it's a little aggressive thinking we can knock that off in one day, but this is the reality, right? I mean, in the real world, you open something up, you think you're gonna throw in an extra few screws or a couple of joist hangers, and then get right back to work reskinning, but we spent most of our day just getting it ready to deck, right? So this is what's going on. This stuff you see behind me is just us taking care of our posts. We put them in last night. We're getting a little moisture in the evening still where we are, and we didn't want to get the wood wet and have it start to twist again. It's cedar we're using here, and cedar, when it grows like this. So when you cut it and it gets wet, it wants to go like this. Makes a hell of a mess. So you put in a board on top, a couple of screws to keep things from spinning around overnight. Just a little tip in case you get stuck like we did, having to come back the next day. When it comes to your cedar, and we chose cedar on this job instead of pressure treated, you could keep your costs down, but in this particular case, client wanted to spend a few extra bucks so it could smell pretty. What we're gonna get here is, it's a local building store cedar. Now, I don't know what it's like where you're from, but in our region, there are only so many places that you can get cedar from, and only one of them really has great relationship with the mills out west, okay? So when we order our cedar, we got it all delivered from one building store, and it's because it was convenient and they could deliver on our schedule, which is kind of last minute on this project. We don't get the best cedar in town, just to be honest. This is a decent quality cedar, but what we're getting is a lot of stuff that's got a lot of movement. So there's gonna be a bit of fighting to get all these boards in place. If you have an opportunity, do a little research in your neighborhood, find out who gets the best quality cedar, and then go and take a look at their product, grab a few boards, make sure they're all nice and straight. 16-foot boards nice and straight is rare, so only the guys that have the best relationships get them in stock. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going shopping. Not all trees are made the same, okay? So when it comes out of the mill, there's different quality levels, and if you're one of those picky type people who really wants to make sure everything's perfect, and you don't want to fight with your lumber to install it, then you better pay a little bit extra and get the A-grade quality, all right? So today we're gonna deck it, we're gonna put on the railings, the stairs, everything. It should take us about 4 hours. That's why we assumed that we should have been able to finish this yesterday. All things being equal, who cares? It's a beautiful day. It's time to get to work. My system for installing your 5/4 deck boards is as follows. 1, take your load and start laying it out. And you'll quickly identify boards that have got a bad warp to them. I call it the hockey stick collection, and they're all over here, okay? If I have to force a couple of them in, which we will, just by the number here I can tell, I've got probably 2 or 3 that I'm gonna have to force in, then that's fine. But I wanna identify the straightest lumber that I have just by putting them down together. We also wanna take a look at the crown. You're gonna see that all of the wood has got a grain in it, okay? So what you want is you take a look at the grain. It's like a bowl in a lot of cases, and that bowl is gonna start like this and it'll curl over time. So what you wanna do is you wanna have the crown up, which is the top of the rainbow facing up, so that it's like this instead, okay? While that's drying, it'll be trying to dry ends down, which are already screwed in place. So then the board stays flat. If you leave it the other way, it'll be fighting and drying and trying to lift your screws. You run the risk of these things kind of coming loose over time, and you get this cupping effect. It's not very nice to walk on. Now this is the advantage of getting boards longer than you're gonna use. Now there's a lot of people out there have this misconception that cedar only comes in 16-foot lengths. That's not true. I can get it up to 20 feet. We have a couple of locations in town that have great relationships with mills and get me 20-foot cedar boards, so I can do an 18, 19-foot deck and still just install all my splits and cut them off when I'm done. And that's worth its weight in gold, because at the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is build your deck with joints on the joists. That's why we're replacing this deck. The one that was here was cedar, and they did that. They had short lumber and it caused early rot. It was a disaster. So we're gonna avoid that at all costs. Oh, that's got a bad split and it's already cupping, so it's upside down and it's backwards. Here's an example of a decision that you got to make for yourself. Oh, I'm bleeding. Imagine that. This board right in this position is crowned up the way we want it. That's the most ideal situation. Unfortunately, it also comes with some bad damage on the edge here in 2 spots, probably from some young kid at the store with a forklift, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Not a big deal. Okay, yeah, it's crowned the wrong way. But I would rather have it crowned the wrong way than have a nasty, ugly spot showing. And because we ordered this on a delivery, I don't have a whole lot of choice. I gotta use this board. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my giant triangle here. Now, watch this because these corners are all rounded, all right? And the system here with a rounded deck is really quite dangerous. If you flip it around this way, you'll make contact with the solid side and you'll actually make the mark on the right place. Okay, so there we go. Always come backwards and slide up to your post. And when you're cutting, cut the pencil to disappear and you know you're making the right move. It's probably the most important measurement on the entire build. Once you get this one done, everything else should just go nice and smooth because we've organized our wood to be straight and we have our finish all figured out. So this one board, the first one you set on behind your post, once you've got that, that's like your template. All you gotta do is make sure everything is gapped consistently after that. You're home free. Jigsaws don't have a break on them. Make sure the blade stops moving before you set it down and always set it down sideways. That's a lesson you learn the hard way. So what I'm doing now is I'm setting this board in place so it's not moving around. And I'm using this screw just to mark the middle of my stud, or my joist, sorry. So that after I get all my deck boards in place, it's a lot easier for me to know exactly where I'm going. I don't have it all buried on me. There you go. You want the head just a little bit below the surface. Don't leave it out. It'll look like junk. And what happens is that wood will end up swelling up over time and slowly close that hole over. It'll be perfect. Here's a note for you. There's 2 colors of screws in the market where we are. There's green and brown. And generally speaking, pressure treated lumber came in green up until recently. Now they have a brown pressure treated lumber. They still have a green pressure treated lumber. And here's what I'm gonna suggest. I don't care what color your wood is, you buy the brown screw, all right? If you buy green lumber, you use the brown screw, it's gonna look stupid for the first year. But for the next 39 years of the deck life, it'll be the same color as that pressure treated lumber once the sun has a chance to get at it for a little while. If you use the green screw, it'll look great for the first year and look stupid for the next 39 years. People are sticklers about putting the screw in exactly the same spot. 1 inch off the edge, has to be 1 inch off the edge. If there's a knot in the wood 1 inch off the edge, don't put a screw there, okay? Find somewhere else to put that screw. You have to get outside the rings of that knot, all right? If that knot was right here, I'd be putting my first screw over here because I'm not screwing through a knot. It's guaranteed to crumble and pop on you. Now here we go. You see that pull nice and tight? Now we're going to be using the saw later to cut off the edge. So it's better if all of your edges are screwed down first because that'll save you a whole lot of time and you won't have to screw around with it afterwards and risk splitting your wood. So when I started to put in that screw, I could feel the resistance of the knot and it was much further than what was visible there. So the knot's probably gone an angle through the wood. So what I did is I went into reverse and I burned it backwards, pushing down through the wood. Once I cleared the knot, then I drove it in. So since we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on the boards, we're going to start screwing at the very end. So what you want to do is you start your screw in the wood, put it on reverse, and push down while going backwards till you get a little bit of smoke. Then you drive it down, and it'll never split on you. I learned that trick, of all things, from an electrician. If you've ever tried putting screws in the end of a piece of cedar, you know it splits 99 times out of 99. The fact that I just did 4 in a row means that I can make miracles happen. This is the point where we can put some pressure on this wood and pull it forward. Okay, That's one way to straighten a board. There is another way. Now ladies, this is something that's awesome. You can do this all by yourself because you can sit on top of your deck, get it all set up. It's a one-person operation. And you can just lean. With your hand, you can throw your shoulder into it, okay? And you close that gap until you're absolutely in love with it. Drive your screw. Don't release the pressure until you get all your screws in. All right? And then let off. This is annoying. Okay, so update, we have our deck finished. We have all the boards down, all of our cuts made. And as you can see, it's a lot bigger looking now than it was when we first started, which is amazing. Amazing how clean and bright always makes something look bigger. We are gonna tackle the rest of this project and hopefully get it done in the next hour and a half or so, because there is a storm of brewing. We gotta get done and out of here before we get blown away from Kansas. All right, it is railing day. I'm so excited because I've got about 2 hours to finish this job off before I get flooded out from a rainstorm that's coming. So let's get to work. We're putting in a horizontal rail kit. If you've never seen this done before, it's really, really simple. We are gonna go with a top and bottom rail that comes pre-drilled. We're going with cedar to match our deck. And then of course, we're gonna have this top plate that we install it up to and leave a gap at the bottom. That way everything stays nice and dry. And then we're going to finish all this off with a decorative drink ledge. We're gonna put a 5/4 by 6-inch board on top. And that way we have a surface on the top that we can screw together from the bottom. Everything will be clean and shiny, and we can sand and polish it and have it beautiful years to come. We're gonna finish this whole system over to the stairs and down our 2 steps onto the regular landing. And we're gonna do these really gradual because when you get visitors to the house, it's nice to consider the fact that grandma is only 5 feet tall and she just can't high step it like she used to. So instead of going with a 9.5-inch stair, we're gonna go with 3 steps here with a 6-inch rise. And that'll be simple to build. We're just gonna use 2x6 and make a couple of boxes, tie it together so no one slips, and voila, we're gonna have ourselves a finished project. Now this kit is gonna throw you for a loop because it has end caps. And these get installed on the end of the rail, top and bottom, and then you set it in place. And then they have these little places here that you can actually use to screw these into the wood so that you're not screwing through the end of the wood, you're screwing through a plate. And that'll keep your rail from breaking and rotting out over time. Now some of you may have seen my son Nate did a little video on this kind of process not too long ago, last year sometime, right? And I think he was a lot better at it than I was. He got a real knack for sticking these things in real quick. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that video because this is frustrating. There we go, rocking. So at this point, we're just gonna finish putting all of the structural screws in, and then we'll tie a couple of screws in from the top into this section, getting rid of this gap here so you don't have an air space here. Nothing worse when you're sitting down and looking past your railing and you see space in between your rails. So we'll get that nice and tightened up, and then we'll be able to cut our 5/4 on top and screw that from the bottom. And this is a perfect drink ledge, perfect height for standing up there and relaxing and having some time with your friends. So I've cut this top plate that we talked about. This is the 5/4 board. This edge is actually sharp. It's not very attractive. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pop down to the chop saw and we're gonna cut some corners off, take our palm sander, soften all that up, and then we'll come up and screw this in place. We're gonna just take our palm sander. I'm using a 220 grit just because cedar is a softwood lumber and it doesn't take a whole lot of energy, and you can just burn right through the whole board. Sometimes you just gotta learn by trial and error here. Just softening up the edges. Keep in mind that since we're going to be using our hands on these, we really want to make sure that no one's going to have an injury. So this handrail is nice, but this, now that's sexy. Now, if you don't have a hammer drill, that's fine. I don't have a hammer drill this time around. I'm going to use a regular drill to demonstrate. Just a VSR drill. You get the Tapcon screw kit from your local building store, and you get the one that has the bit in it. So you always have the drill bit that's the right size. You won't be disappointed. Now without the hammer drill function, this takes a little bit longer, but still very effective. Okay, you see how long that hole is. And we just set our screw here. Oh, hello, puppy. Now feel that. Listen to that torque. That isn't going anywhere for 100 years. There's nobody going to be able to rip that out of the wall. That's not the concern, because our 4x4 post is right into the frame. If this is a surface mount, maybe that's a concern, and you might want to open the wall from the other side and block it and drive yourself an 8-inch screw in there. But, dear Lord, that's a lot of work to avoid having to put a post into the framing. Very important when it comes time to do your skirting to know which kind you want to go with. Here we're going to go with more of a solid skirt. We're looking for animal control. Because we don't get direct sun in this area, we're not so concerned about air passing through. If you do get direct sun, I would suggest going with like a privacy lattice so you get a little bit of large animal control and wind. But since we don't need that here, we're going to go for a nice clean look. That works. I've got a nice gap under here. I can get my hand underneath. The other thing you want to think about is, decoratively speaking, you don't want to have them meeting up like that. You want one covering the other. And I would always suggest that the place that you want it to be the prettiest is the one you want to put on last. So this is our street view, so we'll put that on last. We're going to start here with this one. Again, putting this screw flush with the wood. You don't want to bury it, okay? This is a screw that you want to be able to pull out if you ever need to get access underneath your deck. So if you bury it, the wood will swell, and then when you try to take it out, you'll destroy your wood. About 2 inches down. When you get near the middle, stop, start at the other end with a full board and come towards the middle again. Now I'll show you why. If when you get to the middle, you're left with a gap like this, you don't want to cut a board to fit that hole that's that nasty. What you do is you take the total amount of width of these two boards plus the gap, divide it by 3, and then cut 3 boards the same width. Install all 3 of those here, and that'll make that gap. Just take probably 3/4 of an inch off of this board, and this board, and then you won't even notice that the boards are a different size, and you won't get stuck with a little sliver at one of the ends. And don't forget, finish your entire skirt before you start building your stairs. 1, because it's really hard to work behind the staircase, and 2, if you put your skirt up to this area, up to where the stairs are, you have to close the side of the stairs right to the ground, or you lose the ability to maintain your critters. So finish the entire skirt, and then it'll be stair time. All right, so now it comes time for the stairs, and you've got a couple of options out there. Whenever you're dealing with black metal, as for your finishing work, you can always go to the building store, and they'll have pre-made black metal stair risers for you, and you just screw the deck boards from underneath into that. That's a doable system, but only if you've got the same sort of height requirements as a traditional 8-inch rise step. So if it's a little bit different and you got to do something custom, then that's not going to be any good for you. You can always buy the wooden ones that come pre-made as well, and you can shave the top and bottom a little bit, but remember, code in most places, and what people are used to is that every step is the same height, rise, and run length. So if you start making modifications like that, you end up with really long, odd kind of shaped steps, And the natural function of people going up and down stairs is abruptly changed. So you can be coming downstairs, engaged in conversation, not paying attention, and almost fall all over yourself just because the height's wrong. So what you want to do is you want to make sure every step is exactly the same, give or take about 1/4 inch. On exterior applications, I would even go give or take 1/2 inch, just to make life simple, okay? Now, I am thinking of the street. When you're looking at my stair, because I'm making all of this out of cedar, I'm not going to finish it with any other surface boards other than the top. So what I've done is I've created a little bit of blocking. I'm just going to map this out so it makes some sense. Okay, we can visualize this together. And the back actually sits inside the two of the outsides. So I try to keep the homeowners in mind when I'm designing these things and doing videos. I try to use the same sort of building materials and tools that you're going to have access to. Now, there are faster ways to build framing. And you can use air tools and all that sort of thing with the proper exterior fasteners. But to be totally honest, I know most people don't have access to those kinds of tools. And why would you? How often in your life are you going to be framing a deck? Ridiculous with how many screws I'm putting in. I dare say you won't find anybody who's able to just walk over and rip this apart. They're going to need some serious tools. So now this post is built into the frame. The frame is attached to the frame of the deck, and that is really, really solid. When I get the handrail on there, it's going to be invincible. Testimony to the guy that put these pavers down originally. Not too often you see this, but I built my stair directly on these pavers, and I have these two posts cut exactly the same length, and they're sitting on the paver inside the box. Screwed them together. Check that out. Folks, if you start level, you build level. So now we got our box in place. Put my second box on. And I'm just covering it with the 5/4 board. So I made all my boxes the same size. I cut all my floorboards first. I'm lining up. So when I'm building this and I have to work my way around, I got to do a little jigsaw work. This over here. What we're going to do right now is demonstrate a simple railing system that is attractive and forgiving, which is important. And you can see that it'll actually make some sense. So that's where it goes. Okay, you see how my line is perpendicular? If I was to lift that straight up in the air, that hole will be directly above that hole. The gap remains constant. Whoa! These are awesome. Now listen, I'm gonna go through this again. These come set for a traditional 42-inch railing system, which is great if you're building something to code so somebody doesn't fall off your stairs and plunge to their ultimate demise. But what we're doing is just creating a safety railing for grandma to come home to visit. And she's not all that tall. So what we did is we took the top off and I ran it through the saw. This is just aluminum and it's powder coated. So, boom, we cut it down so that when grandma's climbing this railing, she isn't holding a railing above her head. Because honestly, 42 inches, that's hard. Most older people don't have a lot of strength in their shoulders, and they're using their bicep and tricep muscles when they're going up a railing. And so when you're setting safety rails in bathrooms, it's usually pretty low so they can have their arms straight to their body and they can grab something like this, okay? So if your handrail is up like this, even if she's holding onto it and she slips, she's gonna let go because she doesn't have the strength to hold her body weight if she slips at that angle. So make sure when you've got a railing and you're thinking about older people, cut it down if you got an opportunity. If you don't, make it extra wide and put on a second handrail for them. So what you want to do is just get down here, close one eye, get a weird look on your face, line that up, and then mark it. And then we'll double check, because if you cut it too long, it won't fit into place. And it won't. But that's fine, because I can cut it shorter. I can't cut it even longer the second time. Makes sense. Ooh, no daylight through there. That is perfect. Loving it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just create flush to flush here and here. Relatively speaking. I'm gonna trace this. Oh, that was really well done. That was really good. What would I give for 3 hands? All right. This is the part of the job where I really piss off the safety trolls. Yes, I'm using my saw without a pair of glasses because I like to be able to see what I'm doing when I'm doing crazy things like this. Now I'm gonna line up my cut. I'm holding my safety blade, my guard out of the way. I'm gonna line this up and I'm gonna go for it. And I missed. That's much better. And from the other side and the other angle. Oh, I feel like I'm auditioning for America's Got Talent. Look at that. What do I get a golden buzzer? There we go. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I'm gonna take this one extra step. I'm gonna put it right into the post and help line it all up. Here's my top plate, cut it. And now we'll put our 45 on, cut our corners. And a little bit where it comes to the rail, just for clean it up. Because we like our soft edges. Look, Mom, I'm without a mask. When the grandmas come, you let them know this is all for them. And you get all the points you can get out of it, Max. Well, there we go. Welcome to the end of our project. I am so pleased with the way this turned out. Really surprised, actually, how well this turned out. We didn't really expect this dramatic of a transformation from the beginning. I don't know why, but sometimes when you look at something that just doesn't look very good, you think it's hopeless and not salvageable. And this was a great example of how to salvage something that already exists. So this is exactly the same frame with a couple modifications. Of course, it's refaced all over with my really simple deck finishing system. Some decorative LED lights on top. Everything is soft, cornered, and polished and sanded, okay? Now don't forget, when you're gonna take a project like this on, if you don't want to go with the cedar route because of the cost, you have other options. There's a sienna brown, of course, it's regularly pressure treated. A lot of those products take a lot more maintenance long term. This, we can just sand it, stick it in place, give it a couple weeks, put a finish coat on it, seal it up, and walk away and enjoy it for the rest of the summer. All right, so really glad you could join us on this. I couldn't be more proud. If you have any questions on how to build a project, or if you have something you think you can't save and you want to try to salvage it, pick my brain, go into the comment section, ask your questions. I'll answer them myself every day. Sometimes Max jumps in too. If you got technical questions related to the process of making these videos, feel free to bug him and ask him questions. He jumps in there too. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram. We've got a brand new page we're trying to build, so we'd love to get your feedback on that as well. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't, because we are the place to be if you want to learn anything about home renovation and how to maintain your property and make money in your own home. We'll see you again next time. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reality Renovision. If you're new to our channel, then I suggest you subscribe to the channel over here. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for notifications so you'll be told every time a new video comes up. And if you'd like, you can click the link right here and you can binge watch all the episodes that we have on our playlist. Amazing information, everything DIY and decor and renovation and remodeling. Thanks for joining us.